Washington Post, December 15th, my birthday last year. MAGA leaders warned Trump the base is checking out. Will he listen? And you actually went to the White House. Here you are, printed in WAPO. As Donald Trump ate his crab cake lunch inside the White House last month, conservative pollster Mark Mitchell tried to explain that there was a disconnect between what the administration seemed to be focused on and what Trump's passionate base of supporters wanted to see. Sir, you got shot at the Butler rally, Mitchell said, invoking the really strong optics of Trump raising his fist in defiance after the assassination attempt in Pennsylvania in July 2024. You said fight, 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 but nobody ever clarified what that means, Mitchell continued. And right now, you're fighting Marjorie Taylor Greene and not actually fighting for Americans. And so we all know how the rest of that conversation went. I'm sure he took that really well and said, you know what, you're absolutely right. Let's not invade Iran and let's pass some populist economic policies. And now, he's sitting at plus 15 in the polls, right? Is that how that went down, more or less?
Yeah, kind of. To really unpack, what happened is that, again, people are biased and polls shouldn't be. And I don't endorse candidates or shill for a political party, and none of these parties pay me. But I think in 2024, there were objective reasons to believe that the Trump platform was aligned with the majority of Americans and had things that would improve the state of America, whether he's doing those things or not. It's we probably should have a rule of law. We probably shouldn't be subsidizing business labor with legal aliens. The assimilation problem is a problem. We should probably have mass deportations. And that was a very strong position. Over 60% of America supported mass deportation. And another one that people don't like to talk about is that people were upset at the overreach, waste, fraud, and statism of most recently the Biden administration. And there were egregious examples, and people were upset at the federal government. There was a mandate for a federal government reform. And then there was the kitchen table affordability issues. Now, I'm sophisticated enough to not blame Biden inflation. Right? This is a uniparty that inflates, but what we really have is a corporate oligarchy that is concentrating wealth and power and has purchased our political system. Okay? Now, Trump said golden age, and you can make of that what you will, but everybody thinks he was an economic populism and the middle class was hurting. And so objectively, it's he acknowledged that in many forms, and that was a reason for the middle class to vote for him. And so he won. Now I'm tracking this, and we can argue about whether some of the ways that he signaled his early presidency were helpful or not, but he was doing well from an approval perspective, especially among the young voters very early in his term. And that's because they were seeing things like DOGE, seeing things like his early Project 2025 executive actions. Those were popular. People wanted to see the federal government cleaned up. They want criminals arrested. They want people deported. They want, discrimination out of the workplace and stuff like that. And then the wheels fell off. So you have April, which it's really hard to look at the tariff chaos and say that any of that was helpful. Then you have Operation Midnight Hammer, and it's everybody's what's going on here, guys? Then you have DOGE, who talks about cutting $1 trillion in deficit and then gets sidelined, likely by establishment Republicans. Then you have Epstein, and it's this is symbolic of the government reform people want to see, and you're just going to laugh it off and insult your followers. And all of a sudden, I'm this is not going to work. We're going to lose these earnest mandates that people had for these things. Republicans are ignoring them. Trump changed. And so I was being very vocal. So then what happened is Charlie Kirk got shot, and Charlie Kirk was an influence to the president. And so there was a situation in October and November where the special elections didn't go the Republicans' way. They underperformed the polls a lot. They went into election day with a government shutdown with really no plan about what they were going to do. And then Trump was out there literally counter-signaling every core component of the platform that he ran on in the press. 600,000 Chinese students, don't talk to me about affordability. So I was freaking out on Twitter, and I was called a panican, but it's no, you're taking this mandate and pissing it away. And I was calling that out really of July of last year. So all the Republicans are coming in terms of, oh man, we really screwed it up. I was warning you guys a year ago, right? And so when I went to the White House, what it really was about was that they were worried. Some people in the administration were worried that the people that Trump was being influenced by every day didn't have anybody looking out for the under 40 voter or people who understand the finer nuances of late day capitalism. He's talking to Larry Ellison. He's talking to Lindsey Graham. He's talking to Sean Hannity. He's talking to Bibi Netanyahu. And those are the people that he's making his decision based off. So my message to him was, you're going to lose the midterms if you don't change now. That was last November. And I said, if you're going to win, what you need to do is not bomb Iran. We weren't even talking about that. It was, you need to show that Republicans can govern on the mandate that you were given. And I know you can't fix all these things, but people don't believe that it's the golden age. And they're not going to. You don't have time. What you have to show them is that Republicans have a long-term vision for what the economy of America looks like, and the culture, for that matter. And it can't be we hate Muslims. It can't be suck it up, the stock market's 50K. It needs to be we understand that it doesn't serve all of these new people we got in our Big Tent. And that means you have to acknowledge that maybe it's not great that the housing prices are high. And then the other one is that we haven't seen any government accountability. You're just like whiffed on that one. It's like, look, everybody's laughing at Kash Patel. They don't believe his story about Charlie Kirk because you didn't fire anybody from the FBI. You got to show these people that we're cleaning up. And it's like he started talking about Lindsey Graham's golf drive. So he was not engaging at all. He really, in my opinion, the impression was that he didn't care, or he's subject to certain constraints that don't reflect the American voter. And so at that point, I was basically like, we're cooked. And then it's like, again, I was publicly vocal about Iran. I supplied polling to the White House that showed that it was really stupid. Intel was telling him not to do it. The vice president was telling him not to do it.
Yeah.
Literally, So, it's just, he's like the idea where it's like, okay, you Republicans, this is the best chance you're ever going to get. Like, whip out that strategy. Whip out that Americans first, not America first, Americans first strategy and execute. And they literally don't have one. The one big beautiful bill was just another Republican pork back scratching bill. The Democrats will pass theirs when they get in. It's just it's cooked. It's the two-party uniparty system is still an oligarchy that doesn't serve the interests of the American vote.
Yeah. Okay. So that was a great answer. That was a big answer. So there's a few things I want to dig into a little bit. First, since we mentioned the Iran question, this is why I'm of the opinion, as again someone who did not vote for Kamala Harris based on her support for the Israeli genocidal war. But I remember John Kiriakou, the old CIA guy, saying, when he was working in Washington, the Israeli prime minister would come and they would lobby every president to attack Iran, and every president said, no, we can't do it. And I think what you said there in your answer, which is that Trump is subject to certain constraints, shall we say, that may or may not have something to do with the suppression of the Epstein files, he seems uniquely under the thumb of the Israelis, to the point where, I don't think Kamala Harris would have been a good president by any stretch of the imagination. I think she would have been absolutely dreadful on foreign policy. I don't know if she'd have taken it this far, because as we learned within a week, the war was unwinnable. Iran has been preparing for this for decades. They knew all they had to do was strangle the Strait of Hormuz, and that's checkmate, and it is checkmate. And I think every other president knew that enough to tell Bibi no, and the New York Times reported, as you just made mention of, Vance was against it, Rubio was against it. Rubio, according to the New York Times, said, this is bullshit. This is bullshit. Yeah. He's selling you a line of bullshit. Trump seems to be uniquely compromised by Israel to the point where he was the one guy who would have actually pulled the trigger on this war. So now we're conjecturing. And I'm not saying you are, I'm saying I'm about to, right? And I am. It's all speculation.
We
it's
can
all
only
hypothetical,
conjecture.
Of course, right?
Yeah. So let me just say the Harris thing, and I'm not going to try and argue with you. I'm just going to say, we don't know what the predicate to an Iran strike would have been. But remember, Trump did away with the agreement, so there was no agreement. There was still ostensibly the Iran nuclear threat. Sure. And that what we see in the uniparty is the left foot stomps on Russia, the right foot stomps on the Middle East. Okay? So there might have been a predicate to war that allowed them to go engage Iran in an extension of the Ukraine proxy conflict against Russia. Or, maybe we would just double down on Russia for the total global war that everybody seems to want, right? But I think it's like she obviously made Israelis not happy by at least acknowledging that there were some grievances with the Palestinian people. But that doesn't mean that, like, the establishment Democrat, like, somewhat Bolshevik part of the party that she represents has Chuck Schumer in it. You know what I mean? Like, that's the point, is that it's like, again, you still have establishment AIPAC-backed Democrats who, even though they might talk about Palestine, ultimately will do certain things. And that's all I can say. Now, as for Trump, I would say it's correct to question the Epstein stuff because he did nothing to help himself. Right. The right thing to do was say, yeah, there's a problem here. We should investigate it and put the FBI on the Epstein thing. Or just throw the files out. And it's like, okay, well, when you say it's like my friends, automatically people are like, bro, what are we doing here? Right. So he made that problem himself. And I gave the advice last July. Just say the FBI is investigating it. It's like, let's focus on what you got elected for. Like, fire the people in the FBI that were spying on school moms. You know what I mean? Like, let's do that. Or something like that would have been the right thing to do to show people that we're reforming the government. Now, as for like subject to constraints, again, we'll never know. But I think recent Trump behavior has shown us that he's able to break with Israel, or has been given the pass to, and is disengaging from their strategic interest, which was to destabilize Iran. So that would be my evidence potentially that he isn't, like, quote unquote, owned by Israel because of blackmail. I do think he made that decision. Now, why he made the decision, again, we can only conjecture, but it was against the advice of a lot of intelligent people that had, like, information that was like, this is bad, and he did it anyways. And I think the, like, simplest answer is that he really likes Lindsey Graham, and Lindsey Graham knows how to work Trump, and Lindsey Graham was acting as his Senate whisperer. I think he was probably being told that, sir, do this, you'll be a hero. Sir, do this, and you're going to get these votes in the Senate because all of a sudden people will want to support your SAVE Act. And he talks about them everywhere, and they're, like, attached to the hip. And Lindsey Graham has done, it's been documented by multiple press outfits that he spends a lot of time in Israel talking to intelligence. So I think that's really what happens. It's the simplest solution. And it's like, okay, that's what, and again, he's not helping the optics when your chief backer is tied to a religious organization that thinks they own the Middle East. Like, that is true. That is objectively true.
Yes, and I would say in terms of him, defying Israel, I mean, he does this dance with us, every few weeks. I mean, when they signed the MOU, it was amazing. He comes on stage at the G7 and just lays out what all of the Iran war critics were saying from day one. I don't want to be Herbert Hoover. I don't want to plunge the economy into a global depression. Hey, why is it fair that Iran can't have ballistic missiles when other countries can't? Like, this is what everybody has been saying who said this war was a horrible idea to begin with. And then a couple weeks after that, of course, I don't want to deal with these people. They're animals. We're going to bomb the hell out of them. I am not willing to say at this point that he is really willing to defy Israel in any meaningful way. I think my read on it is he's running out the clock to the midterms because he knows he can't have a full-fledged. What are you going to do? Have a full-fledged exchange where you plunge the economy into a depression in September? So I don't know. I mean, this is obviously speculation, but my read on it is that he's going to keep playing this footsie game until after November. Either way, that's what it seems like to me, as opposed to any meaningful defiance of the Israeli agenda.
No, I don't think so. Here's why: the polling now is bad, like worse than 2018 bad.
Sure. And
you could say, all right, well, maybe the Republicans will wave some magic ballot harvesting wand, or maybe you could say, well, Liberty Vote took over Dominion and they're just going to cook it. And it's like, all of these are like legitimate questions, right? But he's losing right now. And even if he just loses the House, his presidency is over. They will pick apart his entire administration with anti-fraud cases. Like, that's just it. And that isn't even talking about training the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. So the status quo is untenable for Trump. And if he wants to win and save his presidency, he needs a huge win. And running out the clock ain't going to do it. Like literally, I just think about the things that would potentially happen for Republicans to, in my opinion, at this point, if the polling is accurate, win. And it would be like Iran blowing up a portion of Manhattan, or Iran sinking a U.S. aircraft carrier, or Iran just like suddenly capitulating, which they're not going to do, right? Or the economy, like it's laughable to talk about. Like there is no economic data that can happen between now and November that people would feel and would forget about the way in which they were symbolically betrayed, and forget about the way that all of a sudden the Republican Party forgot that it was a Big Tent. That's the problem. And they're just not going to get these new voters. They had to come out. And that was always going to be the problem. Like,
but what about Trump doing, sorry to cut you off, but what about Trump doing the popular thing, which is just declare victory, even though no one would buy that it's a victory, and just leave? Like, that's what the polling says people want. People want out of this, right? So if you need a Hail Mary play, it seems like that's the Hail Mary play, is to finally and like definitively poke Israel in the eye and say, you know what? We're done. You want Lebanon? You're going to have to fight Iran for it. We're out.
You know, like, again, that doesn't clean up the fact that we seriously degraded our Middle East presence. We did an ill-advised war that affected the global economy and will, in my opinion, probably affect it a lot more in the next 2 to 3 months. And it kind of puts a cherry on top of the fact that it was not the right thing to do. So it's like he might get a bump. That might help him somewhat. But it's not going to make people say, well, like, we hired Trump to fix the government and the economy, and he bombed Iran. Like that, you just can't undo that.
Please clap.